Hello, Adijus here with the final episode of the Choosing a CO series, Tier 0! Finally doing this after like 5 months since I did Tier 1. Now, I kind of avoided doing this for a bit because I don't really play these COs. This is known as the broken CO tier. These are the COs you can't really use in Global League. You play as like maybe versus your friends casual play, or you put your computer player as one of these COs if you want more of a challenge. So these are the broken COs. I don't really use them that often. However, within the broken CO tier, Tier 0, there are subsections of how broken they are. There's actually 4 subsections. Now, I don't count Nell very much in this tier. I actually think Nell's more of like a Tier 1 or Tier 2 CO, and results really vary with her, so I'm not going to include her in this tier. So just brush her off as one of those luck COs with Flak and Jugger. So let's not talk about Nell. Anyway, in the subsections, we got the borderline broken. We're talking Grit, we're talking Sturm. Both these guys are pretty damn good, but you know, they're allowed in Fog for one thing. And they're not quite nearly as broken as the other COs. They're very map dependent as well. So they're not always super broken. Next up, you have the father-son duo, Kanbei, Kanbu, and his papa, Grandpa Sensei, riddled with dementia apparently in the series. Then you have freaking Colin tier, which is like pretty damn broken. Like this is, you're gonna steamroll most opponents. If you're not steamrolling people, something is wrong with you. You want to go to a doctor, get yourself checked out, maybe a mental institution as well. You should be playing pretty damn good. And then there's the Bork des Fusk tier, which is Hachi, and Hachi's just too freaking. Don't play as Hachi unless you're like, man, I could drink like 10 shots and be like barely alive and probably beat someone with Hachi. Like, Hachi is just so broken. Anyway, so we have the subsections. We're not going to go over now, but I'm going to start with the least broken to most broken.
Yes, Tier 0 with Colin, Grit, Hachi, Kanbei, Nell, Sensei, and Sturm.
So let's start off with Sturm, our favorite sniff-it turned into ventilator man. He's probably the least broken of the broken tier, arguably with Grit, but he can still really break a few maps due to his incredibly strong day-to-day power of moving through all terrain with 1 terrain costs. So this allows all his units basically to reach the front lines faster than any of your opponents. You should be capping properties first. You should be getting reinforcements first. That is his main draw. He also has the negative 20% firepower cut, as well as the 20% defensive boost, which is nice because the defensive boost is more important than the firepower loss. As we talked about in other videos, that defense is more important than offense in Advance Wars. It stacks with terrain. So if you plop one of Sturm's guys on like a city or on a mountain or something, good luck dislodging it. Like that, it's going to have a lot of defense. Throw in a super CO power or a CO power in there, and we're talking like tons of defense. You're not going to dislodge these things. The thing about Sturm is there's a dichotomy of Sturm. You see, he gets his really fast recons. It's very aggressive early game are going on. With recons, you try to get the income lead and harass a lot of opponents' infantry using his recons. However, then you shift over like turn 8 or 10 or something like that, and you become very defensive because he uses a lot of indirect units. He uses a lot of artillery, rockets are viable, maybe even missiles are viable, because they can move around pretty easily, unlike other COs. So rockets are actually pretty good, and you can hunker down, move through forts pretty easily. And his infantry rolls are unparalleled, basically, until you get to like Kanbei or something. But basically, they're so strong, like it takes usually 3 infantry to kill one of his infantry, even on plains, even on roads. They have such good defense, so unparalleled infantry walls, great indirects. So then he kind of becomes like, you get your income lead, then you hold back and make like a big line of artillery and indirects, and then you slowly push. So he's really speedy at the beginning, doing all these attacks, then he becomes defensive, which is very strange, and not a lot of players are used to this. So it can be kind of hard to play as him, usually, knowing that you go on the offensive early, then you slowly go on the defensive. Because if you go on the offensive, you like throw tanks into their HQ area, he can't really dislodge opponents' units from like cities and stuff because his offensive firepower is so weak. So you kind of need indirects to help dislodge your opponent's units from those terrain because of his poor offensive firepower. Regarding maps, Sturm loves maps where there's a ton of terrain that it can be used freely while your opponent suffers day to day, slogging through forests and whatnot. He also likes maps where his recons can interrupt caps very early, so contested properties in the middle maybe with a lot of forests in between, he loves that shit. So he can really interrupt and get an income advantage early. Then he can do his slow, methodical push afterward with the indirects. He doesn't really mind larger, smaller maps. He's very flexible. But generally, the more forests and cities he can sit on, the better. Sturm's Super CO power and CO power are strong but not overpowering and generally weaker than most of the other COs in the broken CO tier, so I would consider that a weakness of his. It kind of disincentivizes your opponents from clumping their units together by virtue of the meteor, but other than that, kind of a weak Super CO power and CO power. Generally, people tend to spam their CO power more for the offensive and defensive bonuses, I've noticed as well, instead of saving up for the Super CO power. But in general, it's not a huge impact on the game as Super CO power compared to other COs like Colin and Kanbei and whatnot. Next up, we got Grid. Now, Grid is one of the lower level broken COs. He's often allowed in fog games because artillery aren't as viable in fog as in standard due to vision needs, you need recons and tanks, and the ineffectiveness of artillery zoning. In standard, however, Grid is a menace to deal with, as he can artillery zone over half the map with enough artillery, often forcing opponents to go back up once every turn once he gets enough artillery up. Similar to Fog, you need to punish Grid as early as possible before he can secure equal income or gain map control. Once that happens, bye-bye. Once Grid achieves either of these objectives, the game is likely over. As a Grid player, you want to really build only 4 units in standard. Artillery, of course, infantry, anti-air, and the occasional early game tank. You don't really need to build recons like in Fog, which is nice. It frees up more money for Grid. Similar to Sturm, Grid's effectiveness is very map dependent. Grid's effectiveness is often tied to the map's chokiness and how small the map is. In general, the more choky the map is and the smaller, the better it is for Grid. Lots of mountains and pipes are also great for Grid because that encourage chokiness. And also, maps where airports aren't there are a huge boon for Grid. He hates airports because they can go around mountains and whatnot. So, usually if there's no airports and it's a choky map, that usually means Grid breaks the map, which can give even stronger tier 4 COs like Colin and Kanbei a run for their money. So he's really map dependent, but in general, I'd say Grid is at the lower end with Sturm. Regarding Grid's powers, typically you want to spam his normal CO power rather than his Super CO power, because his Super CO power gives him double the range as bonuses as the CO power. However, it does not give any firepower bonus, contrary to what most people think. So people usually just spam the normal CO power over and over because it gives both the firepower and the range bonus, rather than waiting just to get 1 extra range with no firepower bonus. Let's look into the more mid-level brokenness level of the COs. We're talking Canby, Canbu, Canbai, Kanbai. He's probably one of the most well-known COs in Advance Wars, to be honest, and anyone who's ever played a pre-deployed map knows how overpowered it can be. 30% attack and defense bonuses for just 20% increase in costs is insane. No CO can attack an equal unit on a city from a plane and come out ahead in an exchange versus Kanbai. Any CO. It is ridiculous, his defensive bonuses. It is insane. It is not fair. It is not fun playing against Kanbei. I don't care if you're playing high funds or whatever stupid thing you're playing. Anyway, it's basically impossible to dislodge his units on cities. If he's capping a property, you can't stop it unless you have a whole army to back it up. If you have an infantry on infantry, you can't interrupt his cap. He's just going to blast you to death. There's no chance. So he just basically just wins everything that's on a city, any engagement like that, unless you have a huge-ass army behind you. You better have better teched up units than he does, or else you're going to get steamrolled. Basically, even dislodging these units from forest is a huge challenge. It makes early game matchups near impossible to deal with him. He is insane in the early game. You need to wait until you have a very robust, strong army before you can tackle his units. So you have to let him cap in the early game and then plan around beating him up later in the game, where you have Neo tanks and maybe he can only afford tanks or medium tanks. So the early game is where he really shines. Similarly, Kanbei likes smaller maps where you can really, his day-to-day power is right in your face. Larger maps where you can't really afford APCs as early or recons or whatnot, he doesn't do quite as well on, but he's still very strong. But smaller maps where there's immediate gunfire, attacking each other over small properties nearby, those are bread and butter. So small maps, Kanbei likes. Big maps, he's still good on, though. It's not like he's bad, but you want to have games where the early game is really decided by Kanbei, and he just basically wins from there. Man, y'all probably already know about how overpowered a Super CO power is. Just use a Super CO power. It gives you like infinite defense. I don't even know the numbers, but just don't attack him. His firepower is stronger, his defense is stronger, his counterattacks are 1.5 increased. It's just nuts. You're not going to stop him once he pops his Super CO power. Why would you ever use a CO power? I don't know. But just, he's like impossible to beat once he uses a Super CO power. So you're going to have to wait till next turn to attack him, basically. Have fun. Next up, we got Lost Grandpa Sensei, who is similarly overpowered to Kanbai. However, it is different in that it is not his day-to-day that is overpowered. It is his CO powers that are overpowered. His CO power, and to a lesser extent, his Super CO power, are mind-bogglingly broken. He basically never needs to be all infantry. Maybe it's something in the early game to cap some properties, but otherwise just build vehicles the rest of the game, because every time you pop your CO power, you get 10 free infantry or even more. So, like, why would you even need to build infantry? You plop them on the front lines with not an HP. They don't even need to walk there. It's, like, not even just free. They're, like, where you want them to be on the front lines. Saves you a boatload of walk time. And did I mention that his infantry are also stronger than Sammy's infantry? Even though she is the infantry specialist, they have 40% firepower increase. I don't even know where the hell that came from. But they're the strongest infantry in the game. Stronger than Sammy's. Stronger than Kanbei, Kanbu, or whatever the hell. I'm never going to get it right. Just better than everything. It's like, where do they come from? And then you add on that there's going to be 50 free infantry a game. And it just freaking boggles the mind how overpowered that is. His Super CO power is not quite as overpowered in my experience. However, it is very situational. If your opponent is coming in near your cities and you need to repel an attack, sure, throw in 4 mechs immediately on the front lines to blast them away. Man, you can tell I had some bad experiences with Sensei. He's just overpowered. You can't win unit count with him. He will always win unit count. You can be beating him in every other thing. He will always have more units than you. And if he doesn't, your opponent sucks at large fill in the blank. So, yeah, Sensei is a lot to deal with. He's not fun to play. I hate playing Sensei players. If you play Sensei, you can reconsider a lot of choices in your life. Yeah, the firepower bonus. Did I mention when they do get spawned at 9 HP, they have 50% firepower. Not only the 40%, but also the CO bonus of using the CO power. So a 9 HP infantry with 50% firepower, it's going to quickly turn the tide. It's going to win infantry wars. It's going to blast tanks if you're doing mechs. And yeah, his copters are insane too, but it's not quite as overpowered. Yeah, just build a bunch of copters and vehicles, and the infantry take care of themselves. Sensei, as you probably guessed, likes maps. He doesn't care if it's large, it's small, it's big, it's tall. He just likes maps with a lot of cities, so he can spam a lot of infantry. That's basically what it is. Bonus if there's also copters and whatnot. Also, his transports and shit, like his APCs. If you thought his infantry weren't overpowered enough, he gets transport bonuses as well. So his infantry are just too insane. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know why his 40% bonus. It makes 0 sense, but he's good. Yeah. His copters are crazy too. Who even needs bombers when your copters have like 60%, 65% increase on their freaking attack? He's one of the COs just like game freaks like, let's just throw on this shit. And they had no idea what they're doing. So yeah, that's Sensei. We're getting into the truly broken as hell tier. We're talking about Colin. It doesn't matter what map it is. It doesn't really matter anything. He's just always going to be good no matter what. I mean, he's just busted. It's 20% cheaper units, and he only has a 10% firepower reduction. And he's going to be spamming his CO power every other turn anyway, so he's going to have normal firepower because he gets the 10% bonus. And if there's a comm tower, you're not even going to really even notice it that much that he has the firepower reduction. It's just, every other turn, for the adder side slip cost, you're going to get an extra 1.5 in your income. That is just nuts. That you will have Neotanks by turn 8. Your opponent probably have like, maybe it's turn 12. Your opponent has 5 tanks and an artillery. You have 4 Neo tanks and a Mega tank or some crap. It does not make sense. It's too overpowered. He's too overpowered. He typically likes, if you're going to use him, and you're facing off against these other uber overpowered COs, you choose him on maps where there's a lot of bases, so he can spam out all his teched up units every turn, throw out as many Neo tanks as you want, throw out as many bombers as you want. Just more bases, more money, more better. He's insanely broken. I don't really have much more to say. I don't think I can give advice to playing him because he's just so overpowered. Hachi is borked as fusk. That's all there is. His day-to-day really isn't even that bad. But if you can get 5 Neo tanks by turn 10, while your opponent only has like 5 or 6 tanks, something is very wrong. I never play him. I just don't play Hachi. So I don't really have any advice on playing him other than there's still time to change. You can make a change in your life. You don't have to play as Hachi. You can be a normal person too. Just don't play Hachi. It doesn't make sense. If you're playing, even when I'm playing casual versus friends or something, I don't choose Hachi. That's all there is. I do not condone using Hachi. If you're using Hachi, you're on your own. I'm not giving any advice to you. Yeah. That about wraps it up for the CO tier. I mean, people usually don't play the CO tier as much, so there's not as much advice I can give you for them. But if you do choose to use them, I hope this helped you out. I hope you don't use them too much or your brain will turn to mush. And I hope to see you guys next time. Peace.